Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We don't know where you are, but the important thing, you are here during the OUC event, OGB EMEA Tour. And today is the Lux OUG chapter. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Flora, to be here virtually on Lux OUG. Fernando.
So, Flora, you're welcome here. Thank you for joining virtually here. We from LuxOUG, we are a user group founded in 2019. We have more than 100 members registered in your portal. It's a free membership. Everyone can join us. And we have more than 100 articles published. And just to say, the stage is yours, and share.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. Wait. Okay. Do you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having me virtually. Thank you to all the people who organized this tour. I think you're doing a great job, and during these strange times. So I would like to thank you all. So I'm going to start with a very quick presentation of myself. So my name is Flora Barriele. I've been working in IT for 10 years, 5 years as a DBA. I'm French, I live in Switzerland. I'm an Oracle ace. I love talking, reading about technology. I love sharing knowledge. You can find me on Twitter. I have a blog, and don't hesitate to contact me if you want. And I work for a company called Swissquote, and it's a Swiss banking group specialized in online financial and trading services. So let's start with this presentation. As a DBA in your organization, what could go wrong for you? So let's see 2 situations that maybe you already faced. So first, let's imagine that you have a fellow developer that comes to your desk and tells you that a table seems to be obsolete in a database now, and they want to delete it. But they're not sure if this table is still in use, if some applications still need this table, etc. And they ask you as a DBA, can you tell me if this table is still used? Or for example, you have the chief security officer or even the CEO of your company that comes to your desk and tells you that there's a major outage and that a critical table has just been dropped. And they ask you, can you tell me who did this? What is the worst situation you can be in? What is the worst thing you really don't want to answer to them? Is that, I don't know. Will you feel comfortable telling them in those situations, I don't know? I would not feel comfortable, and that's what I want to avoid usually. So today in this presentation, we're going to talk about several technical tools that will help us avoid saying, I don't know in this situation. So first, how can we get in this situation as a DBA in a small or big company or in any organization? So maybe you work for a company that started as a small startup, and then over the years, it grew in a really big company in no time. And maybe you had to implement a lot of new projects, new feature very fast, very quickly. Maybe you worked with a lot of teams under pressure. Maybe you have to build quick fixes on top of quick fixes in the IT architecture. Maybe you're a victim of technical debt, or you had project with poor planifications, with no documentation, no track kept, etc. So you have very different factors that can lead you to be in this situation. And sometimes what you can end up with is a huge system with, for example, one central database, I don't know, 800 schemas, one applicative user shared by 200 applications, etc., etc. So this is the kind of situation, maybe you know, maybe you were in this situation before, maybe you still are, and this is what we are going to explore today. So what can you do about it? What can you do about this situation? First, you can make a good resolution, but the problem with good resolutions is that we all know that we make good resolutions and we never stick to it. So today we are going to see different features that will help us to stick to it. So first of all, maybe the first thing we want to do is to enforce the principle of least privilege in our IT system. Of course, this principle can be applied to other fields, not only database, but any IT field. So the principle of least privilege is simply the fact that you want to give only necessary privileges to users or system or processes to limit the potential damages. So you really want to grant the necessary privileges and only this to make the system work. You also want to avoid privilege creep in your IT organization and of course in your database. So what is privilege creep? So privilege creep actually is, for example, when you have an employee within a company and this person changed roles, but you do not revoke the previous privileges this person had in his or her previous job. So the person is still in the organization and has a lot of privileges that he or she is not supposed to use anymore. Privilege creep is also when you grant some very permissive privileges to a person, for example, to a developer, just for troubleshooting, just for one day, for example. So this person asks you for a very specific privilege just to help resolving an incident, for example. And the problem is that when you forget to revoke this privilege. So this is also privilege. And now we are going to see together what we can do about it, how we can enforce the principle of least privilege and avoid privilege creep with different features that we have with Oracle database. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the schema only account. So schema only account is a new feature that has been introduced in Oracle 18c. So it's very simple. Actually, it's a schema without direct connection. So it's a schema that has no password, and it's a schema that you can never connect because it has no password. So it means that you can have, for example, all objects, tables, etc. of an application on a dedicated schema that could be a schema only account where no one or nothing could interfere. There are a few limitations that you have to be aware of with the schema only accounts, is that you cannot have administrative privilege on schema only accounts. So it means you cannot grant sysdba or sysbackup to a schema only account. So can a schema only account be locked? Yes, but you will not experience a lock after too much failed logins, for example. Another thing that is very interesting is that with those schemas, you don't have any passwords, so you don't have to implement a password rotation policy on those schemas because they don't have any password. With the schemas only account, you can also use a proxy connection to connect. So it means that you will not be able to directly connect to a schema only account, but you can give the privilege to another schema, another user, to connect through proxy authentication to this schema. What does it mean? So it means that you will be able to connect to the schema through proxy authentication to create objects, but it will force you to be very specific on who has the right to use this proxy connection. And then you will have a better understanding and a better management of who is allowed to do such thing. Of course, you can convert an existing regular schema to a schema-only account, and you can convert it back. For example, you can have a schema-only account and give this schema a new password, and then you will be able to connect to it like in a regular schema. So it's very easy to go from one type of schema to the other. There is one specific thing that I wanted to talk about with schema-only accounts is that starting from 19C, all the Oracle maintained accounts will become schema-only. You can prevent this behavior, for example, by setting a strong password before you upgrade in 19C. So for example, you set a strong password to some of these Oracle maintained schemas. And then when you upgrade, the password will be kept and they will not be turned into schema-only accounts. Or you can also do it after the upgrade. But however, Oracle recommends that you should keep these accounts as schema-only accounts for security reasons. So now I'm going to show you a quick demo and show you how easy it is to create a schema-only account. I'm wondering if you can see the terminal I'm showing right now, if it's big enough.
Yeah, it's pretty fine.
Okay. So let's start. I'm going to run this demo in the Oracle Cloud. So I'm connected as a user who is called admin, and this user has the privilege to create a schema. And then very easily, I can create a schema-only account named metal repository. And it's pretty easy. I just use create user metal repository, and that's it. So you can see that I didn't have to specify any password because it's a schema-only account. Then I can grant some privileges to this schema-only account. For example, I grant the privilege to use a table space, to create a table. And in the view DBA users, I can see that this new schema-only account has authentication type to none, which means basically that this schema doesn't have any password and it is a schema-only account. I can also create a table in this schema-only account as another user. So here I'm connected as an admin user, so I can create a table called metal bands. And this table will hold a list of metal bands. I add a primary key to this table, and then I insert some band's name in this table. And that's it. So with these very simple statements, we can create schema-only accounts. So back to the slides. So this very simple feature for me is really useful to avoid unrestricted access to the objects. And it will help you to make sure that other schemas only have the necessary privileges to interact with this schema-only account. And of course, it will prevent applications to directly connect to the schema holding the objects. So now I'm going to make a very quick overview of unified audits. It will not be the main part of this presentation, so it's going to be pretty quick, but I'm going to give you the basics of unified audits. So what is unified audit? So auditing is the fact that you monitor and record configure database actions for any users, any use, anything that can happen in your database. So why would you want to do that? First of all, maybe you want to detect suspicious activity in your database, or you also want to enforce accountability for all the actions executed in your database by applications or by users, for example. Or maybe you also want to comply with a specific regulation in your country or in your company. For example, I work for a bank, so we have to comply with a lot of banking regulations in Switzerland, for example. So audit will help you achieve that. Now, a quick explanation on why it's now called unified, because since Oracle 12.1, you can capture audit information from a variety of sources, but all this information will now be available in the same format in a data dictionary view called Unified Audit Trail. So you will be able to capture a very different activities, but they will all go in the same place. So you will not have to look for info in various locations. If you have multi-tenant, you can apply audit settings to individual PDBs or to the CDB, depending on the type of policy and on the type of activity that you wanna audit. And in a multi-tenant environment, each PDB, including the root, has its own unified audit trail. So please be aware that starting from Oracle 20C, traditional audit will be deprecated, but there is a document on my Oracle support that is written on these slides that will help you to convert your traditional policies to unified audit policies. And there is a script that is provided, and it's called standard to unified.sql. And you will be able to download it from this note. So with unified audit, you can create custom policies to audit everything, every action, everything that happens in your database. You need to have specific roles to create an audit policy. So those roles are audit admin or audit viewer, if you wanna see the audit records. I'm going to give you a few examples of what you can do, but for example, you can audit all the activities of a specific user. You can audit a role. You can audit all the system privileges that are directly granted to this role, for example. You can audit all the system privileges that are used in a database, for example, I don't know, select any table and things like this. And you can also audit actions that are performed on specific objects. For example, you can audit all the updates on a specific critical table, etc. So basically, the unified audit and all the package you can use to create policies are very complex, but also very rich, and I think you will always find something that will fit your need in terms of auditing. You can also use predefined audit policies that have been introduced with version 19C and 20C. So with version 19C, you have a policy called ORA CIS recommendations, and that will audit actions recommended by Center of Internet Security. So if your company has to comply with the recommendations from CIS, then this policy would be very useful. And starting from 20C, you have the same, but for security, for technical implementation guides recommendations. So this policy is available starting from 20C if you need it. One last thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is new in 19C, is that starting from this version, you can audit only top-level SQL statements if you want to. So what does it mean? It means that if you audit, for example, the use of a package, a PL SQL package that has a lot of statements, maybe you want to know when this package has been used, but you don't really need to audit all the statements inside this package, because you can easily deduce that if the package has been used, then all the statements within this package have been used too. So you can decide to audit only the top level SQL statement, and you will, with this, you will reduce the amount of audit data that you will generate. And it can be really useful, especially if you have very complex PL SQL packages for your application. Unified audit is extremely useful for a wide variety of cases, but it will capture every action defined in your policy. So it means that depending on what you want to achieve, you will have to be very selective, especially if you have a lot of, I don't know, a lot of activity in your database, a lot of different applications connecting to your database, etc. And of course, Unified Audit needs maintenance. So you will need to monitor the space used by all these audit records. You will need to purge them maybe, I don't know, every month, every year, every 3 months. It depends on your company policy. You will maybe also have to archive them somewhere, export them, re-import them for further use, etc. So you will really have to be careful about maintaining all these audit implementation that you have in your system. And actually, Unified Audit and audit in general is really powerful and really useful to have a very precise view of everything that happens in your database. But maybe you will wonder, is there another way to know if a privilege has actually been used, maybe at least once? So maybe over the last week, you just want to know if this application has used this table, but you don't want to know if it has been used like 1,000 times or just one time. You just want to know if a privilege has been actually used. Or maybe you want to know if you have a privilege that is granted but should not. Or if a privilege is granted but is totally useless and it's never used for the moment, and you are afraid that maybe it shouldn't be there, but in some days, in some weeks, someone is going to use this privilege and this person shouldn't do that. So actually, you will have other means different than Unified Audit to answer those questions. And this leads me to the next part of this presentation, and it's privilege analysis. So what is privilege analysis? So privilege analysis is not a new feature. It's a feature that will help you capture the privileges that are used in your database at runtime. So it means when there is activity in your database, privilege analysis is able to capture what is going on and which privileges are currently used. And the findings will be stored in the data dictionary view. So you will be able, with privilege analysis results, to compare what privileges have been requested, for example, by developers or by specific third-party app. And you will be able to compare those privileges requested with what is actually useful and what privileges are actually used by the application. For example, you will be able to bust things like this. So you will be able to see if there's a select any table that has been requested and that shouldn't be there. Now, can you use privilege analysis? So privilege analysis is part of an extra cost option in Oracle Database Vault. But actually I lied, it's not true anymore. So privilege analysis is not part of this extra cost option anymore. And with Enterprise Edition since 2018, you can use it without having Oracle Database Vault. And the good news is that this wave has been extended and backported to all versions starting from 12.1. So if you have a database in 12, 18, or 19, you can use privilege analysis with Enterprise Edition. So how does it work? So privilege analysis lets you create policies that can be role-based. So it means that when you create a role-based policy capture, you provide a list of roles, and all the privileges that are used by these roles will be captured. But you can also capture privileges based on context. So it means that you can use the function syscontext And if a condition is true, then the privilege will be captured. So it means that, for example, if you want to capture all the actions for a specific user or for a specific IP address, you can use the context-based capture. You can see everything that you can use in the definition of syscontext function. I'm giving the example of user and IP address, but you have all a lot of different things that you can use in this function. You can also capture privileges based on role and context. You can mix the two together. And there is also the database-wide capture. So the database-wide capture is finally an unconditional analysis. So it means that every privileges in your database will be captured except those used by sys. So I would recommend that you use this kind of capture in a very precise way, and maybe not for a very long time, or maybe on a specific database that you're aware of the activity, because it will simply capture everything that is going on in the database. You can capture, of course, the privileges in CDB or in each PDB. And you have to be aware of some restrictions. So for example, the first one I already talked about is that when you use the database-wide capture, sys privileges will not be captured. And this is the case for the other type of captures. And also you can only have one policy enabled at a time. So when you perform, for example, role-based capture, you will not be able to enable another capture at the same time. So how does it work? It's pretty simple. So you create a capture policy, you run it, and then when you decided you captured all that you needed, you can stop it, and then the findings will be processed and they will be stored in a data dictionary view. So the findings will not be written during the capture, but only after the capture. But enough talk, I'm going to show you a demo of privilege analysis. So we are back in the same database. And first of all, we check in DBA users that we have our metal repository that we created before, but we also have an applicative user called app-metal. And this app-metal has to connect with the password. So we create a specific role called our metal manager, and we grant select, insert and update to this role. We grant this role to our applicative user app-metal. And now, as administrative user, we're connected, and we can see that we have a role called capture admin. And this is the role that will allow us to perform privilege analysis capture. So first of all, in DBA priv captures, we can see all the captures that already exist in the database. And since we did not run any capture yet, we only have the Aura dependency default capture. I will not detail this capture right now, but you can find all the information related to this default capture in the documentation. So first of all, we create a privilege analysis capture. So it's pretty simple. You use DBMS privilege capture package. You use subprogram create capture. You give the capture a name. So in our case, the name is metal detector. You can add a description. So in this case, I want to find out what the hell is this app metal doing. And you can define the type of capture that you want to perform. So if you remember, I talked about role-based capture, context-based capture, and you can also have a combination of the two. So in this example, we will have the combination of role and context. So first of all, we want to capture all the privileges that are associated to the role or metal manager that we created earlier. And we also want to capture on a specific condition. And this condition is that we want to have the session user equals to app metal. So we want to capture everything that is used by app metal and role or metal manager. So now we see that the capture exists in DBA prefs capture, but it's not enabled. So we're going to enable it. It's enabled. We can see that it's enabled. And now we connect as the applicative user. So app metal, we are connected as the application. And for example, the application wants to select everything in the metal band table. And we see that the application deleted one metal band. So we're going to see what happens with the capture results. So we connect back as the administrative user that has the role to manage privilege analysis capture. We stop the capture. We check the capture is stopped. It's not enabled anymore. And we generate the report. And then we can see where the hell is this delete coming from. So in the view DBA used privs, sorry, the screen is a little bit too big. We will see all the privileges that have been captured. So if you remember correctly, we selected all the rows of the table and then we performed one delete. The problem here is that we only see the select. We don't know where the delete is. We can see that the select has been performed thanks to the role or metal manager. Sorry, the screen is not very easy to read there, but this select has been provided thanks to the role or metal manager that we created together, but we don't know where the delete was coming from because it's not captured here. So what can we do about it? Actually, we should create a better capture. So we will create a capture, but only based on the context. We will not base it on the role and the context like we did before. We will simply capture everything, all the privileges that are used by app metal, no matter what role this user may have. So now we can see that our second capture called metal detector is created. Sorry, this one, the second one, better metal detector is created. The previous capture is still here. We enable the better metal detector, so the second one. We checked it's enabled. We connect back as the applicative user. We see that there is one band missing in the table. So we perform another delete connected as the application. We connect back as the administrative user. We stop the capture. We generate the results. And now we hope to have a better understanding of how this delete has been performed by the application. The application was not supposed to delete anything. So here we have more information in the DBA used privs view. And we can see here that the system privilege delete any table has been used by the application. And in the column path, we can see that there is no role granting this delete any table. So it means that this delete any table privilege has been directly granted to the application user. And of course, we can check this because in DBA sysprivs, we can see that the grantee app metal indeed had this delete any table privilege directly granted. So now back to the slides. All the findings that are performed by privilege analysis will be able in all these views. So basically you have DBA used privs, and this view will show you all the privileges that have been used during the capture. You also have DBA unused priv that will show you all the privileges that have been not used. And you also have similar views that are just split by object privileges, system privileges, or user privileges, but basically all the infos from those views will be in the two main views, DBA used privs and DBA unused privs. So for example, DBA unused privs will help you to know which privileges were granted, but were, for example, useless. And it will help you to know what to revoke. So you can also use privilege analysis with Oracle Enterprise Manager starting from version 12.3. So basically, it will give you a user interface to create the policy. So exactly like we did in PL/SQL, you will be able to fill in a description, decide the scope, add any role or condition you want to capture. And basically, it will generate the same PL/SQL code that we used to run the capture. So with privilege analysis, you really want to make sure that your capture runs with realistic workload. So it means that if you want to study the behavior of an application and its privilege, you will have to run the capture, for example, when during the day, if your activity is during the day, or for example, during the night, if you have specific batch processing during the night. And of course, if you have something that runs only once a month or once a year, you will really have to capture during those moments to be able to not miss anything, because what could go wrong is that you capture, for example, something on Monday, and you, based on this capture, you want to revoke some privileges, and then you realize that something that runs only on Saturday or Sunday will need a specific role that you, a specific privilege that you did not capture. So you really want to make sure that you capture during the realistic workload of your application. What you can do is that you can schedule the captures during specific periods, so you don't have to run them manually. You can just schedule the capture during the night, or I don't know, during holidays and things like this, to make sure you have a really good overview of your application workload. And in the end, you will have all the information stored in data dictionary views, like I showed you before. And it will help you to revoke anything that is not used and that should not be granted. It will be especially useful in the case of an application that you don't have the control of the code. For example, a third-party app vendor that has a lot of privileges, that have select any table and stuff like that. And you will be really able to see what is really used and what should not be granted with that kind of applications. Okay, so now I'm going to quickly talk about DBSAT. So it's Oracle Database Security Assessment Tool, but I'm going to call it DBSAT because it's a very long name. So what is this tool? So actually, it's a very simple zip file that you can download on my Oracle support. And you unzip it and you can use it right away. So it's a lightweight utility that will help you to analyze all the configuration of your database regarding security. That will analyze the users, the privileges, the security policies, the parameters you have in your database, etc. Everything related to the security in your database. And that will help you understand what could be a possible security breach in your database, what needs to be improved. And also this, this utility can help you to identify sensitive data in your database, but I will not cover this part in this presentation. You can use DBSAT starting from database 10.2, but I think you might not have this version anymore, but you can use it with almost all the versions and on-prem and in the cloud. So how does it work? So actually it's made of 3 components. So the first component is the collector. It will collect data from the database dictionary views in your database, but also it will collect information on your operating system. So DBSAT, to be able to perform the collection, will need to connect to the database and also to be run as root on your operating system. But if you don't want to perform any OS checks, then you can also just run it as a regular Oracle user. And it will only check the security in the database. So after all these information have been collected, there is a component called the reporter that will simply analyze all the collected data and generate 4 types of reports. That actually all the reports are the same, but in 4 different formats. So you will have HTML, Excel, JSON, and text. And there's also the discoverer component that will help you identify sensitive data, but it's not part of this presentation. So please be aware that the reports contain sensitive information. So basically the reports contain everything that is not secure on your database. So you really don't want to send the report to anybody or just leave the printed report in the printer or anything. So the report contains sensitive information, and just keep it for you and send it only to very relevant coworkers, please. So to help DBSAT to collect everything that it needs in the database, you can create a dedicated user with very few privileges that will let this user collect everything on the database. So you can simply copy paste this code and it will create the necessary user with all the grants to perform the assessment of the database. And how can you run DBSAT? So first you run the collector component. So it's pretty easy. You run the command line with the first argument is collect. Then you give a connection string to connect to the database with a username and password. And you put the name of the output file where you want all the information to be written. So it will generate an encrypted zip file, and the password of this zip file you will have to give it while the collector is running. It will prompt you for a password. And to generate the reports, it's very simple too. So you run DBSAT with a report argument. You give the name of the output file that has been generated by the collector, and it will generate a zip file with the 4 reports the same way encrypted with a password that you provide. So I guess you can imagine that the reports are very rich, full of information, and I'm going to show you very quickly what it looks like, but it's really rich, so I will not show you everything today. So first of all, this is the HTML version of the report, and you can see that the second thing that is written is that this report is highly confidential. So this report contains everything that should be all the issues, the security issues that should be addressed in your database. So for example, in the summary, you can see that there's a section for the user accounts, the privileges, the roles, the auditing, etc. So for example, we created together a schema-only account called Metal Repository. And in DBSAT, we can see that we have this kind of schema-only account on the database. And we can also see that we have regular schemas on the database. With DBSAT, we can also check the system privileges that we have for our users. And in this case, we can see that our applicative user AppMetal had the delete any table system privilege. So it means that if we had used DBSAT before, we maybe would have seen quicker that the application had this very dangerous system privilege. We can also see with DBSAT that we have privilege analysis ongoing on the database. And also, like I showed you, you have a lot more sections that you can explore and have good recommendations on what to fix in your database. So the final part of this presentation is about other different approaches that you can implement to enforce privilege management in your database. So first of all, you can implement schema separation in your database. So what does it mean? It simply means that you can have schemas that own objects that are different from application schemas. So it will help you to avoid having hundreds of applications using one schema, and it will help you to better distinct necessary objects for a specific application, and to be able to have better control over all the privileges that you give to your applications. But before implementing schema separation, please make sure that it will be viable in your organization and it will be maintainable by you and your colleagues. Why am I saying this? Because maybe you want to avoid this situation. So this is a picture of Ludovico Caldara presenting during a conference last year. And what is he showing in this slide? Actually, he's showing the grants on objects between schemas in a single Oracle database. So in this picture, each node is an object, is a schema, sorry, and each edge is a grant. So maybe you want to avoid ending up with something that complex to manage when you decide to go for schema separation. That's why I'm saying, please study and make sure it's viable and maintainable in your organization. So another approach that can be really useful is instrumentation. So what is instrumentation? Basically, it's when you ask your fellow developers to specify, when they're running statements in the database, to specify the module, the action, or the client info that is performing the action in the database. Why is it useful? Because when the developers do this, the DBA will see in $session and $SQL area this information. And what does it mean? It means that the DBA will be less grumpy when troubleshooting. So I will show you how useful instrumentation can be. And I think I'm running a little out of time, so I'm going to be very quick. So I'm going to rerun a capture, but I will ask the application to use instrumentation and to set the module name of the module of the application. And then the application will perform some actions. And when we capture the actions, I'm going pretty quick because we've already seen this part. We see that we captured all the actions, and we also captured the module that executed the actions. So using instrumentation will help you troubleshoot and will help you capture all the privileges, because it will let you know exactly which part of the application is using which privilege. So just cleaning the capture so that you can see that when you stop all the captures, you will, when you remove all the captures, everything will be cleaned in the data dictionary. And that's it for the demo. So I'm jumping to the conclusion now. Is what I want you to remember is that schema-only accounts are secure and maintainable and are really useful to avoid unrestricted access to objects in your database, and will help you have a better control over all the privileges that you give to specific objects. Audit and privilege analysis are two features that are really complementary. And privilege analysis will help you to analyze runtime actions and used privilege, and it will help you to keep healthy privilege management in your system. And DBSAT will give you a very good overview of potential security risks in your database and give you a very important recommendation based on the security. And the main thing that I want to do after using all this is only to revoke, 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 because the less grants, the better. So that's all for me. I think that I went a little over time, so I will be really happy to take any questions by email, on Twitter, or maybe after the online conference. Feel free to ask me any question, and I would like to thank you all.
Thank you so much, Flora. Amazing presentation. I love to see this revoke presentation.
Thanks.
Let's see if we have any questions. No questions. People are too shy today. We just got a comment from Connor. Thank you for the presentation. And that's it. No questions so far. If you have any questions, okay, no, now we have one. Okay, just a compliment. Good presentation, a nice presentation.
Thank you very much.
So that's it.
In name of Lux OUG, thank you. Thank you for joining us in Luxembourg virtually. Unfortunately, but in the next year, probably we'll be together.
I hope. Thank you very much.
Now we get some two questions. How about the mandatory requirements and Unified Audit is the basic? I think it's the same question, but maybe part of the same question.
So do you mean if Unified Audit is the standard now?
I think so. I think that was the question.
So yes, this is the case.
Yeah.
And
somebody is asking, what's the version when you run in the tiny demo? I think it's the version of the database.
It's 19C.
Okay.
It's the databases in the Oracle Cloud, the always free tier.
Nice. So autonomous.
Yes, and you have everything that I showed can be available for free.
Very nice. So thank you one more time, and see you on the next presentation. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.